I would like to welcome everybody to the Vermont Employee Ownership Center's community part of our annual meeting. And I am Cindy Turcot. I am treasurer and past chair of the Vermont Employee Ownership Center. I work for Gardner's Supply Company in Burlington, and we are 100% employee-owned through an ESOP. And I have been very involved with the VEOC since inception. So we wanted to have the opportunity to talk to you a little bit about the Vermont Employee Ownership Center. Our mission is to promote and foster employee ownership. And our goal is to help Vermonters become employee-owned, to keep the roots of our businesses in our communities, to share wealth with all employees throughout the state, and share that wealth with all employees, and to create exit strategies for our exiting shareholder, our owners that want to move their businesses on. So our role is to help owners to help with that transition or to help employees with that. So we welcome you today. We have a few things that we want to do. We'll keep it relatively short, but I'm going to start off with introducing Don Jamison, who's the executive director of the Vermont Employee Ownership Center.
Thanks, Cindy. I'm suddenly struck with stage fright because of all these august people I recognize out there. Thank you so much for coming today. The VEOC over the past year, 2014, it was a lean budget year, as I've been telling people, but we actually did quite a lot, and things happened from seeds that have been planted in earlier years. So there are 3 new employee-owned companies in 2014. They're all cooperatives, worker cooperatives, so they're directly owned by their employees, and they're all quite small. So modest, but 3 of them, 3 new businesses that are employee-owned. Tamarack Media, which is a consulting company in Burlington. There's Woodbelly Pizza, which is a little catering business. There's also Vermont Computing Cooperative in Randolph. So these are 3 new worker cooperatives in the state. In some ways, our biggest news is from a company that's not a Vermont company. It's actually a Massachusetts company, but it has a brewery, that's a hint, in Windsor. It's Harpoon Brewery. We're very pleased to have Dan Kenary here today. He's brought some glasses, which you are free to take, that say, "Cheers to employee ownership" there. So please take some of these and have a harpoon on us. So that, in some ways, is the most exciting news. I'm also bound to tell you about some other things. The way that we work with companies, it's often over quite a number of years. I was just telling the board at our meeting downstairs that what I consider to be the hottest ESOP prospect in the state. This is a larger company that's I think is going to implement an employee stock ownership plan. We've actually been talking to since 2003. So it's a long time horizon. A lot of our work is really staying in touch with people, helping them explore the possibilities. So it's the cultivation of relationships, really, and making sure that they're getting all their questions answered, and are forging connections with the professionals who can help them make these deals happen. So in the last year, we had initial contact with 24 companies. Of those, about 19 were actual realistic prospects for employee ownership, and they join another 30 companies that continue on our active list. So that's a total of about 49 companies that are thinking in some way about employee ownership. Maybe they're thinking real long-term. Maybe it's just checking in with them once a year. Maybe it's talking to them every week. That's really a lot of what we do. So how we get to that point is through our education work. We're doing ownership succession seminars around the state in 9 towns in Vermont. Please, be in touch with me if you want to know the itinerary. This is all going to be published on our website very soon, and there's going to be an ad in Vermont Business Magazine announcing this beginning February 18th in White River Junction. We're taking it around the state. So it's an ownership succession seminar that talks about really all the ways that a business owner can sell their business, including selling to employees, but also selling to family members, to outsiders, to managers. So 4 paths with stories told by Vermont business owners who've done each of those paths. The other major event that we do is our annual conference, which in the coming year is going to be on June the 2nd at St. Michael's College. Last year we had 158 people. That's a fairly typical attendance number for us. It's gone up to about 180 and is, down to 140, but over 12 years it's held steady, about 150 people every year hearing about employee ownership, and workshops about building participatory cultures and the nitty-gritties of how to do employee ownership. So that's all in the works for June the 2nd. That's really all I want to tell you, but I guess a really important point to make here now is that we do have a grant from the state, which is very important to us. We recently got an increase in this fiscal year, which has allowed us to hire an additional staff person, actually doubling our staff capacity. This is Matt, who's a very important person. I can tell you that the old staffing was really not sustainable. So thank you very much to the legislature for increasing our funding for this year, and I hope it continues. So I would like to hand it over to Representative Helen Head, who actually got us our initial funding in 2006. So Helen, thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Well, it's really exciting to see everyone here today and see how far we've come. My initial involvement in employee ownership was back in the 80s when I was in graduate school and did some studies around worker cooperatives. And so it was kind of a natural progression to move to a bill in 2006 that would state the state's interest in developing employee ownership possibilities. And we had pretty modest beginnings, really looking at how this could be studied by the state treasurer in terms of state investment, and looking at priorities for VETA loans. And that moved into funding to help do the kind of education that Don talked about. And I'm really proud of looking at the models that have developed around the state and the education work that's ongoing to make sure that we do more to encourage employee participation, to make sure that there's succession and ownership, and to ensure that jobs stay in Vermont.
Thanks. Thank you, Helen. Also, a really important person in Montpelier to us is Lucy Leriche from the Agency of Commerce and Community Development, who's going to say a couple words, I think, here. Thank you, Lucy.
Well, thank you, Don, and I just want to also echo the thanks to the Vermont Legislature. Having been one of a member myself, I understand the incredible budget pressures you all face. But this is a really important appropriation, and my hat's off to Representative Head for spearheading the effort. In Vermont, we're very fortunate to have a scale that's small enough to allow us to be innovative and try different models. And I think the work of the Vermont Employee Ownership Center is really emblematic of that. It's a great example of how in Vermont we can do it our own way, and we can find different ways to innovate with regards to not only entrepreneurs starting businesses, but different ways to transition businesses, different ways to own businesses, and for employees to benefit and move on in that tradition. And yes, our agency had recommended an increase in the appropriation for the Vermont Employee Ownership Center last year because of the fact that we do have an aging demographic. We have many business owners who are transitioning out or will be transitioning out of their businesses in the next several years, and we wanted to make sure that we don't lose those businesses, that they will pass the baton in some way, in some meaningful way, either to other employees or somehow make sure that they're passing on their business and that lives on in its next form and its next iteration in Vermont. So very, very important work done, and for the board of the Vermont Employee Ownership Center as well, my hat's off to you, and I really we all really appreciate your work, your good work, and our partnership.
We really have a leg up in Vermont because we have some poster child employee-owned companies in the state. There's a great, fairly comprehensive list on our display back there, but you know a lot of the names: Gardner Supply Company and PC Construction and Sonics Industries. I also want to acknowledge and thank King Arthur Flour for providing a bunch of the goodies that are here today, and also for providing a couple of really key board members to us. That's continuing, so thanks to King Arthur Flour. So really, the man of the hour here, I think, is really Dan Kenary from Harpoon Brewery, who's going to tell us the story of his decision and his partner's decision to become an ESOP-owned company. So, Dan, come forward.
Please. Thank you. Thanks, Don. Thank you. Thank you, Don. It's really an honor to be here in this beautiful building with the leaders of this great state. I only get to spend about 20% of my time up here, but my life goal is to flip that, to get up here 80% of the time instead of being down there, but don't tell everybody in Boston that. My partners and I started Harpoon in 1986 on the waterfront in Boston with the goal to make great beer and share it with our friends and neighbors. We were the third craft brewery to open in New England. As of today, last count is there are 287 today in the 6 New England states, with more than 75 in planning. So the world has changed quite a bit in our industry. I have great appreciation for the welcome that we received in Vermont almost 15 years ago when we purchased the shutdown Catamount Brewery in Windsor. Both state and local officials and other companies were tremendously helpful to us as we evaluated that transaction. Now I'd like to tell you a little bit about Harpoon. In 2013, we were the 12th largest craft brewery in the United States with close to 200 full-time and over 100 part-time employees. In Windsor, we have 27 full-time and 25 part-time employees, and our brewery, visitors center, and restaurant produced more than 750,000 cases of beer in 2014 and welcomed more than 140,000 visitors to our brewery in Windsor. In the community, we sponsor and run the Harpoon Point to Point, which is the largest fundraiser for the Vermont Food Bank. Last year, we raised close to $190,000 for the food bank and will go over $1 million in cumulative funds raised in 2015. But the greatest asset that we have and the most important good that we can do for the community involves our people. Making great beer, having welcoming breweries, running wonderful festivals and events, all these require excellent people. In 2014, my partner made clear that he wanted to sell the company. I didn't want to, but agreed to endure a parade of private equity investors, strategic buyers, and investment bankers. And I can tell you that making beer is a lot more fun than sitting through those kinds of meetings. I didn't want to sell to strangers. I wanted to make the people who had helped us build our business over all those years into our partners. I also wanted to keep running Harpoon like a business so we can effectively compete in a very competitive industry. In July of 2014, I announced the creation of the Harpoon Employee Stock Ownership Plan. We bought out my partner and transferred 48% of the company to the ESOP to be given to my fellow employees over the next several years. The long-term goal is in 5 to 7 years, when we've paid down the debt from this transaction, we'll sell the remaining 52% of the company to the employees and become a 100% employee-owned company. Thank you. We have the most creative, dynamic economic system in the world here in America. I want to help others see the clear benefits of our system and share in its many rewards. Employee ownership is a wonderful way to do this. I would like to thank Gardner Supply for their early inspiration to us. I quietly came up to a meeting on the QT like 3 or 4 years ago to sit in on and met Cindy. King Arthur Flowers, we've been welcomed with open arms in the Vermont Employee Ownership Center for their leadership in this area. The ESOP community is welcoming and supportive, and we are proud to be within the family. At a time when many craft brewers are selling to private equity or large international breweries, we are happy to raise a glass and say, cheers to independent craft brewing and employee ownership. Thank you very much for having me today.
Well, thank you all, and please enjoy the goodies and drink some more beer, and let's talk.